Okay, so this one is about the nature of Overunity, and I'm meaning Overunity systems. So the best way to think of Overunity is really something that's wealth generating, something that produces a surplus beyond what is drawn. So Overunity, really what it means is when you unify something, there's a surplus over and above. And so what's really one of the essential principles is that an Overunity system is capable of paradox. Paradox meaning that for whatever's true, the equal and opposite polarity of that truth must also be true from a different perspective, but also from the same perspective. So this is quite complicated, so bear with me. Understand that this Overunity is really the umbrella or the container for all of the projects I'm involved with. Everything that I'm working on is a component part of an Overunity blueprint that I've been working on for many, many years. And some of you know I conducted an experiment for 3 years, became a recluse, and basically mapped my mind to understand the nature of the mind and the interplay between the mind, body, and the spirit, and to determine the nature of reality. And what I came to understand was that really our mind is a map of how the universe works and of how reality works. And if we can translate that map into human systems and processes, as well as hardware and software systems, then just like the universe and just like the mind, we can create wealth generating systems using Overunity. So some of you may be aware of paradox, or perhaps the concept of a qubit. So a qubit really is, how they measure a quantum bit. In binary, with computers, it's absolute because it's polarized. So it's either off or on. It's a switch. You switch it on, you switch it off. Can't be both. It's either a 1 or a 0. So it's entirely deterministic. With a qubit, it can be a 1 and a 0 and everything in between. However, if that qubit is purely digital, then it is still quantized, so entirely deterministic. And this is one of the challenges with quantum cryptography, in that if everything is quantized, it can therefore be predicted or potentially hacked by a premeditated attack. Whereas a fusion of binary and non-binary, meaning analog and digital, then you can potentially create randomness in that system, non-deterministic randomness. So it's a huge topic, and I've been very cagey about talking about this, even with my own investors, because of how potentially disruptive it is. But especially the reason it's topical now is because after many, many years of working on this, the technology now exists to be able to replicate and produce an Overunity system, and in fact an Overunity system that is quantum resistant, meaning that it can avert attack from a hacker utilizing quantum processing. And the solution to that is non-deterministic randomness, which can only be achieved on a system that is utilizing or mirroring, what's the word? Cloning or mimicking a fusion of analog and digital behavior. Emulating is the word I was looking for. Now, how can you emulate something random? Well, if randomness is created by something analog, and you can't predict the fluctuations in something analog like my voice. Like if I'm about to speak, how can you predict the frequency or the amplitude of the sound wave. So this is the challenge with quantum cryptography. And so I've always seen the potential for a quantum resistant solution, not as a simple codec or a simple piece of cryptography, but an Overunity system that has symbiotic components where the gestalt of all of those things working together as one is not only creating Overunity, i.e. a surplus, there's a yield over and above what it draws, but it is also quantum resistant. So Overunity, when applied to, this all began back when I was, in my 20s. I was managing teams of people. I did this for the majority of my career as managing teams of people, salespeople, operations people, admin people, marketing people, procurement people, the full gamut pretty much, apart from finance. I've never managed finance people, other than having my own accountant. And nonetheless, the principles are all the same. So my hypothesis is that there is a blueprint and a method for running a team that will turn it into an Overunity system, meaning that it will yield a surplus over and above what's drawn. Now, in a business context, that's obviously very, very helpful. If you can turn your business unit into a wealth-generating asset, that's ideal. Now, in a perfect world, that yield would be, huge. But in reality, through my experiments and through the successes and failures, what I came to discover is a magic number almost of 11.5%, 11.5625% to be precise, as a yield, in context of being able to create an autonomous system, human system, that self-governs, self-manages, self-regulates, and produces a consistent yield in perpetuity. And the zenith of a self-organizing team is a scenario within which there are no dependencies on any single individual and no dependencies on any single system or piece of software. So the ways that you navigate this or you circumvent this is, if you have a system or a process, it's not a system or a process embedded in a piece of software. It's a system or a process that can be facilitated or administered by a number of different pieces of software. So whether you use Trello boards or Monday, it doesn't matter. And so the simplicity of that system is what's essential. Now, I didn't crack that nut in terms of software development, especially in fail-fast mode. And I think, becoming lean and agile is a whole different beast, but you can make a simplistic blueprint and method when it's based on, pretty simple binary decisions. And so everything that can be can be determined in a binary way then works symbiotically with the non-binary system, which is a human being, which is an analog thing, to fill that gap, to bridge that gap. And so deterministic is a system and a process, and then non-deterministic is a human being to make a random choice based on their unique perspective. And this is how I've always seen Overunity systems working, as a hybrid of human beings and computers or machines. Machines being binary and deterministic, and the human being being the non-deterministic thing, the aspect of it that's random. So in context of a greater system, you can obviously imbue randomness into it if you are encapsulating the randomness of the human being as part of the system, which is actually extremely difficult. But nonetheless, it's pretty easy to create a wealth generating system or an Overunity system in context of business, as long as you have total control over the decision making. So as an example, if you have a boss above you and they don't buy into your vision and you don't have control over every single component within that machine, you can't make all the changes necessary for it to become Overunity. And in fact, part of the issue is if you have collaborative decision making on with respect to the vision, then you also can't solve that problem. So this is one of the paradoxes of Overunity systems, and the inherent nature of an Overunity system is actually paradox. The essence of it is paradox. That's its essential nature is paradox. That it is everything and nothing and everything in between. And so the paradox here being is that the mechanism that enables it to become autonomous, sovereign, self-governed, self-regulated is centralized authority, you see. And this is why, and this is going to be hard for people to wrap their heads around, especially in the DAO space, especially those of you that are in the Web3 or the DAO space and into autonomous organizations who listen to this podcast. You'll be like, how can centralized authority be the solution? It's because nature distributes authority. It doesn't decentralize it. Sorry, it delegates authority. Authority in nature is delegated. It's not distributed. So it can be revoked. It is the best way to think of it. Everything that's given life can have its life taken away. Because life is a privilege, and that privilege can be taken away for no reason. You're not guaranteed your life. You could be hit by lightning and you can lose it. The government can't guarantee you your life. No one can guarantee you your life. So life is not an entitlement. It's not a right. You're entitled to protection if you want to delegate your authority to an agency to protect you, you see. So very, very important to understand this. This is a fundamental principle of an Overunity system, is that authority is delegated. It's not decentralized and distributed. And in fact, an essential component of an Overunity system is to clearly define the scope of the decision making and the framework within which those decisions can be made in a purely deterministic way. And leaving the opinions and the judgments to the human beings. So I was only ever effective, and I tried this a number of times. I was a 2IC. I was a second in charge in a really large retail store. So I had a manager above me, and then there were, I think, 45 staff. And I could get it to operate pretty well with just the impact of my influence. But because I didn't have total control, you see, because I didn't have total control, I couldn't get it to behave in an autonomous way. And in reality, it would have truly thrived if I had full authority that I can then delegate. So it's a very important thing to understand, is that delegated authority is how nature works. And if you think that giving everyone equal authority to make decisions upon who governs us, for example, or what the vision should be for an organization, even, those that will create a lot, it'll wreak havoc, in fact. And I've experienced that as well. So Overunity means consolidated, delegated authority. And so how the question will be is, well, how can there be a dictator? How can there be one centralized authority? This is only the beginning of the process. Because what happens is you then you delegate authority to everybody. So if I start a company, I'm the sole authority. There's no way around it. I'm the managing, it's only me. I'm the director. I'm the sole director. I'm the total shareholder. And if I want someone else to take responsibility for something, I have to delegate authority. It's the same in your life. If you want help from someone, you have to delegate authority to someone. You have to give them the responsibility for an aspect of your care. You know, if you have an accident and you're in a wheelchair, the authority for taking care of yourself, you know, say bathing yourself, has to be delegated. It's not possible for you to be taken care of unless you're prepared to delegate that authority to someone else for that care. This is how all of nature works. And so if you want to create an Overunity system, you initiate the community or the group, then you delegate the authority, and you empower everyone with that responsibility for a deterministic task or duty, and they are totally sovereign and totally free to determine how. And this is absolutely critical. This is absolutely critical. And I'll give you an example of how you regulate someone in a scenario within which they are totally sovereign and free. So a classic one was, so I've managed large teams of portfolio managers, and those portfolio managers manage portfolios of assets, whether those are products and services or customers, the full gamut. The principles are exactly the same. One of the irrefutable truths is that if a portfolio manager calls more customers, they will generate more revenue. Even if those sales calls are crap, they will generate more revenue. It's an irrefutable statistic. And so the agreement is, when the portfolio manager comes in, is that if they are not yielding at the 11.5% rate, compounding month on month, then the agreement is that they will default back to what is known. Because what we do know is that if the activity increases, it'll generate results. But what we agree is to total autonomy in a scenario within which they are ahead by 25%. And so they self-manage, they self-regulate. If you're ahead of your target by 50%, then you've generated that surplus. But if it falls off, and then it's you've got a regulatory framework in place that will ensure that it doesn't go below a certain level. And this is how regulation works, collaboratively. You need regulation. You know, if an oak tree wasn't, I use the oak tree all the time. If an oak tree wasn't regulated by the DNA, its DNA blueprint, then what would stop it from evolving into a rose bush or becoming a giraffe? You know, everything has to be regulated by a limiter that prevents it from going beyond a certain bandwidth or a certain parameter, so that it can be a unique thing within the infinite nature of all that is. Unless it's constrained in some way, we'll never see the uniqueness of anything. And so you can do that collaboratively. And so the agreement is that if they drop below the projected target, then they're going to agree that they're going to go back to making 30 calls a day as the safety mechanism, as the safety switch. to ensure that we don't go into a deficit. And it's really simple. If you're 50% ahead and then you want to take a week off, that's fine. You're totally free. You're totally sovereign. You're totally free. But because of your will, you used your will, and your word is your bond. The agreement was to 30 calls a day if your projections fall below 11.5%. Cool. And what inevitably happens is people, and you see this in every single role that I had, where I was managing portfolio managers, because it's done monthly. At the end of the month, everyone's doing 60 calls a day, to try and hit their target. Then they hit their target, and then at the beginning of the month, they peter off. And so you can see the sine wave, the curve, the peaks and the troughs, the peaks and the troughs. That pressure of, and then the release is essential. You don't want it to be a straight line all the time. You want to utilize that pressure to push you into achieving greatness, into creating a surplus, because that surplus is what enables you to have those moments of peace. And so at the start of the month, we meander along, we do our monthly kickoff, we all agree on everything together. They all get an increase in their targets. And then they go, oh, such a huge stretch. And then they hit it again. And such is nature. And so autonomy and self-responsibility and self-regulation and delegated authority is already in existence now. The thing that corrupts it is when you try and distribute authority and make it a consensus on all decision making. It's like if you're driving the car, the decision on how to drive is the driver's. That's why everyone hates a backseat driver. Imagine driving a car and it had to have consensus in the car on how to drive, on the ideal way to drive. Consensus decision making does not work. Does not work. Consensus, and this is where I want to segue into the value of consensus. Consensus is on the vision. Consensus is on why are we here, the unified intent of purpose. So it's actually not the vision in terms of the picture, because everyone has a unique vision. Your vision for your life is yours. My vision for my life is mine. The vision for the founder of a company is theirs. What's important is that if there is a massive vision, that it encapsulates the vision and incorporates the vision of the people contained within the greater vision. Consensus is on what do we stand for? What are our values? What do we agree we're not going to do? And that's what we get consensus on. We get consensus on these are the laws of our universe. These are the laws that govern us. I agree that if the group becomes at risk, I'm going to kick into flight here. I'm going to make 30 calls a day, or I'm going to put the fire out, or I'm going to take care of the children, or whatever it is. We set the rules of the game. We create the laws of the universe that we want to live in. Together, we create the space for us to be autonomous. We accept and agree the regulatory framework using our word. Our word is our bond. That if things get this bad, I agree to do this, so that we then never go into a deficit. And when I can, and when I'm excited and inspired, I'll create as much of a surplus as I can. So you see, we don't need to disrupt and change the entire world and completely flip it on its head. We just need a shift in perspective. Because companies can provide this vehicle for us now. We can get clever about the entities we spin up, and whether it's a trust or a charity or a company, whatever it may be. Self-responsibility is a self-responsibility. If you want to use the law as a safety net, you're free to do so. But you're a human being, use your will and use your word. So Overunity, that's the context of a team that produces Overunity, a surplus, and in perpetuity, and it's totally autonomous. But in terms of a software system, what you have to do is you have to create paradox, because paradox already exists in nature. It's just hidden in plain sight. But if you want to create an Overunity software system or a hardware system, then it has to be both analog and digital, and it has to behave like a qubit. So it has to be deterministic and non-deterministic. And paradox has to be the essential truth of the whole thing. So what does that mean? Well, it means that it has to be it is a fusion of unity and separation. That's really what it boils down to, is that it's unified and separate. And such as all Overunity systems. If you take one system and it's unified, there's no separation, it's just one thing, and then you copy that and paste it so that you've got two exact versions, but then you shatter it. You shatter the second one. And so it's shattered into a million fragments. It's still that same thing. But what defines it now is what separates it, the space in between. The space in between the fragments. So you see, an Overunity system is one thing that has been shattered into millions of different pieces that are all sovereign, all autonomous. All of those fragments have their own individual, sovereign, immutable identity, but they are also part of a unified whole. You see? So that's what creates the first ever paradox, is the shattering of one thing into trillions of sovereign individual shards or fragments that each have their own immutable identity. That's the first component. The second component is that those fragments can then bond together to create a gestalt. So alone, I can create this, and then if I bond with you together, we can create this. And these two bonded together, if I bond with a third one, together we can create this. And so you see what the shattering of one thing, of taking something that is one, and then shattering it to create separation, is what enables the uniqueness to emerge out of that one thing. The uniqueness of the immutable agent, the immutable fragment that's immutable, it bonds to something else and it creates something else individually unique. And then another thing, and that's unique. And so we're going to call that a company. And then over there's another 5 shards, they come together. There's another company. Over there's 20 shards. And now these two companies can bond together to create a coalition or whatever it may be, to create a value chain. Now we've got an industry forming. You see, so separation is what enables us to express our uniqueness. And the unity is the way that we actualize the potential of that uniqueness through another. So one of my skills is I can help people unlock their vision for their venture. I work with founders of frontier ventures, bleeding edge innovation, and they're notorious for dulling down their vision so that a venture capitalist can understand it. So, they're trying to get an investor to understand it. So they're always dulling down their vision to be smaller than what they are, to unlock small lumps of money off of, regular investors. And so what I do is I help them to unlock their true vision and give themselves permission to think as big, to share the vision that's drawing them forward. And it's a really hard thing to accept and admit how big your vision is. And so if you're limited by your uniqueness, an oak tree is an oak tree. It's never going to be a rose bush. So the oak tree's uniqueness limits it to being an oak tree. So my uniqueness limits me. I'm extremely visionary. So my uniqueness, it limits me in terms of I'm just not concerned with, and I never want to spend time recording things in logs and, keeping ledgers and, recording information. That is like hell to me. So I'm limited. And so if I'm spending time doing that stuff, then to leverage the full potential of my uniqueness, to lever the value of my uniqueness as something innovative, something that nature has innovated to create, then I need to collaborate with someone who can leverage that potential, who is really good at and does want to record things and keep documents and do the accounting and all that stuff. And this is the beauty of nature. And what we need to come to understand is that nature already is an autonomous, self-regulating, Overunity system. And so is your mind. And so if nature's already cracked it, all we need to do is follow nature, but we have to figure out how it actually works. So with an Overunity software system, we want to replicate this. We want to take one system. So we're going to say, okay, here's one system. And we're going to say, this is the new internet. One system, we're going to call it the internet. Internet version 2, for want of a better phrase. I know there is an internet version 2, but don't get confused with Web 3 and stuff like that, but say that we're creating the internet, a new version of the internet. It's a closed system. It's one thing. What do? Well, we shatter it into 1 trillion pieces. Those 1 trillion pieces are the individual agents, the human beings. So how can we make that agent immutable? Well, the technology exists right now. And in fact, it's happening in New Zealand right now. We make that immutable. Okay, so how can we create a geospatial map of where those separate pieces are? Well, everyone carries a phone, so you create a geospatial map. Well, how do you solve the problem of trusting people with our data? So you create an Overunity backend. And so the same way where the agent, the human being, is sovereign and free and autonomous, the data framework has to be the same. So if there's a human being who's sovereign and autonomous and immutable, there has to be one constitution that is sovereign, autonomous and immutable and bonded to the agent, bonded to the human being. No one else has access to it. It harvests and it operates as a living will. Legally, a living will, it can be bonded in common law. Therefore, your will cannot be imposed upon by a government or any form of agent. Only you have that power. And this technology exists right now. So you have a living will. It's wrapped in in what we would call an NFT, so a smart contract. And that smart contract, and so that is an immutable asset. And we can sit on a blockchain right now, but in truth, the blockchain is about to get leapfrogged as well. that may be unnerving, but because of immutable data frameworks that are emerging right now, blockchain is not going to be an essential component pretty soon. Although there will be obviously have to be a transition and a migration from blockchain onto new technologies. So if you have an immutable foundation asset, and it's in the format of a living will in common law, and through your will, it's a living will, you can delegate authority to other agents at your will. And you cannot regulate against the common law will, not possible. So it falls outside of legislation. This technology exists right now. Now, in terms of AI frameworks, constitutional AI is the emerging framework that's coming out now. Well, it's been out for a long time. But the way that it's emerging is at the base layer, the Constitution holds the bias, and that feeds up into the AI matrix. Now, if your living will is also the Constitution containing the conscious and unconscious biases of your behavior on the closed system, on the closed internet system, and that's feeding up into the AI matrix, you've always got an immutable Constitution that only you have power over, and only you can delegate authority to governments, agencies, whoever, to have access based on whether you trust them or not. So you can delegate that authority. And of course, the system incentivizes you to share, but you use your own discernment as to whether you trust that third party to share your knowledge with. And so imagine this now a scenario within which your digital agent is on your phone. It's immutable. Only you have access to it. No one else has access to it. Someone can request for you to share your knowledge. And because of the new Llama framework for AI, if you haven't heard of this, Google Llama, and I think Alpaca as well. It's the next generation of AI frameworks where you can have the intelligence on your phone in an immutable framework. And so you're storing all of your biases on your phone, safe as anything. And then the actual framework exists right now. It's called the spatial web. And I'm predicting that this is going to leapfrog Web 3 altogether, but will also be a container for it to transition. But it's a geospatial web. And so what that means is if you have your if you have the intelligence on your phone, someone requests for you to share your knowledge or your intelligence, then you can give them that access through your phone or through physical connection by touching the phones together. Now, this is an ingenious protocol developed by another New Zealander that I'm working with. It's an incentive within a closed system for human beings using the spatial web, so geospatial web technology. It's basically a hive mind. This technology exists right now, and it's been stood up. There's an MVP. And it incentivizes you to physically go and see someone and touch phones together, to share the knowledge of your AI, contained within your AI. And that generates tokens that you can then spend in purchasing apps or the equivalent of goods and services on the marketplace, which again, a geospatial marketplace. So this is the issue that we've always had with AI, is that It's on the internet. Who's got access to it? Can AI take us over? All these kinds of things. There has to be a closed system to consciously usher in the singularity that creates an absolute layer of dependency that is totally immutable and under the custody of the human being to discern whether or not they feel safe enough or can trust someone else enough to give them their details. You've solved all of the issues of KYC compliance because you have a single source of truth. And here's the next layer of paradox, is that the immutability of the agent, of that base layer, is what enables you to have perpetually mutable form. And this is the nature of all Overunity systems, is the paradox is that the antithesis of the thing that you want is the enabler of it. So like with blockchain is the fragmentation of databases. Massive fragmentation of databases and then connections between them. And the paradox is that that's the enabler of there being a trusted single source of truth. And so in the same way, if you want to have perpetually mutable form, so an infinite number of avatars that you can use in a metaverse type situation, which is, obviously, in my view, is going to be potentially be superseded or infused into the spatial web. If you want a perpetually mutable form in terms of a number of different avatars, then there has to be an immutable agent that is a single source of truth that can be trusted by every party. And then what it looks like doesn't matter. You can use as many different avatars as you want, as long as the proof of the KYC evidence is in that immutable agent and it's in the custody of the rightful steward. It can look however you want it to look. So again, another paradox. Something that's immutable is what enables an Overunity system to have perpetually mutable form. And so, so we've got basically a new version of the internet. It leapfrogs blockchain because you've got sovereign immutable agents that are all bonded together and can utilize the processing power of the phone and the storage space on the smartphone as an alternative to servers because it's so low code and it's geospatial and it's happening in real time. So you've got no servers. They're just drawing some juice off the phone. And so what do you need now? Well, you need an economy. I've got a vehicle that's incentivizing me to connect with people and collaborate with people. So the more physical people there I can get in one space to collaborate on a topic for longer periods of time, the more money I'm going to earn. So there's an incentive driving community to spark and initiate cooperatively collaborative projects. And the currency is being minted in the moment that the connections are happening using the power that's on the phone as the phones are connecting with each other, as they're touching each other. And as they're touching each other, that's a mutual agreement to share knowledge, to share the knowledge of the intelligence node, the alpaca or the llama node on the phone with someone you're physically touching and connecting with. It's lit, and this is what infuses into the Māori concept of mana. I've had the privilege of working with a Māori founder, and she's been helping me a lot with understanding the nuances of their culture. And one of them that I love is that every time you meet someone, the intention of the interaction is to enhance their mana. That's what you're seeking to do. It's not about what you're trying to get out of someone when you meet them. When you meet someone, your goal is to enhance their mana. And so if the other individual, if their goal is to enhance your mana, then you're growing the mana of everyone. And your mana is your gravity in an ecosystem. And she shared a wonderful story with me about, when she goes into a room, she can tell the human beings that have mana because of their gravity. The people are orbiting them to be in their presence. And it's often an elder who has deep wisdom, who's imparting that and diffusing that and sharing that to those children so that their mana is increasing over time. And this is the essence of the currency or the token that is generated. By sharing my knowledge and wisdom through the intelligence of my phone that is harvesting my conscious and unconscious bias, I'm willingly sharing that knowledge and wisdom with you in this interaction, in this moment. So I'm increasing your mana. I'm enhancing your mana. You're enhancing my mana. Our phones touch, and we give each other permission to grow each other's mana through the sharing of the intelligence, of our own intelligence. And our mana increases. And so there's a marketplace where you can spend your equivalent of mana. And it's just like any other marketplace, although it's a spatial marketplace in this particular scenario. And so so imagine now a marketplace, and it's got all of the gifts of everyone in the community that they want to make available for people to collaborate on projects. So it begins with I call it a virtual coffee, and the people that work with me know quite well I'm always trying to set up virtual coffees. We call it coffee roulette. Starts with the virtual coffee. You discover, you explore, you unearth the potential for collaboration, and then you seek to meet in person. That's the ideal scenario. And to enhance each other's mana, and then so you're enhancing each other's gravity, and then your gravity draws in someone else who then shares their mana. And as your mana as a community is growing, your gravity within the ecosystem grows. And so then you can access more and more of the gifts of the people on the marketplace because you're incentivized to collaborate. And so you see the emergence of a new economy that's based on cooperation, collaboration, and the sharing of gifts and the intentional enhancing of each other's mana. Now, this isn't a solution to, I'm not saying here's the replacement for the economy. What I am saying is that here's something to complement the economy that we have right now, where we can create gravity and enhance each other's mana and do stuff cooperatively and collaboratively and begin to have a means of exchange. And who knows, at some point, that token, the mana token or whatever we call it, can be listed on an exchange in the formal economy and traded for fiat currency. But, the starting point, it has to start somewhere. So what is the nature of the way that we want to interact and engage with each other? By enhancing each other's mana, by sharing our knowledge, by cooperating and collaborating to create the biggest community to produce a gestalt that is producing an over unity, meaning it is perpetually wealth generating. And our wealth, the surplus is the thing that's created when we work together, that we couldn't have created alone. That's what we want. The uniqueness of what we're capable of creating together. That's what we want. And if we're incentivizing each other to do exactly that, then the only possible outcome is wealth, is surplus. And all we need to do is we need to break down that invisible barrier, the invisible barrier that makes it really hard for me to, I've got a portfolio of founders who are all working on bleeding edge innovation, and it's very challenging to get them to ask each other for help or offer their own help. And so breaking the ice for me that's the value I'm trying to add. If I can help them break the ice and start collaborating and cooperating and asking for help and receiving help, that begins the process of something truly collaborative beginning to happen. And so a tokenomics system or an economic framework that is incentivizing people to break that barrier, to break the ice, that I see as the lever for the progress that we can make together. And, you know, what's incredible is that the technology to stand up an Overunity system in New Zealand exists now. The technology to stand up an MVP exists right now. And an emerging technology that's very new but is coming, it's not far away at all, probably less than a year, is a technology that can make a closed system like that solves all of the problems of that AI creates, being that it's on an open system, i.e. the internet. That will enable it to be quantum resistant, meaning that you can have total entrustment that your living will, your immutable data and container for your knowledge and your wisdom, for your intelligence, the digital twin of your knowledge and wisdom is totally immutable. And that last component, that last elusive component that I've been seeking with the design of Overunity systems is eternal. It becomes eternal. And the eternal, the aspect of it that enables it to be eternal is the aspect of it that makes it invincible. And for it to be invincible, it has to be quantum resistant. And then we have a system that can work for everyone, that we can literally build a new formal economy on in time. But we have to begin sandboxing it first, sandboxing it in fun ways, getting collaboration going, failing, giving feedback, and begin just building. Begin building our new spatial world together, having fun, collaborating, and being incentivized to connect physically with other people. So that's pretty much it for Overunity systems as far as I want to share. Obviously, there are the blueprint applies to physical Overunity systems, so systems that produce energy, surplus energy, and again the same principles apply. If you get all of the components working symbiotically with the right levels of impedance and resistance, then you can produce an Overunity as well of around 11.5%. And it's actually quite simple because it's based on using batteries as a reserve for solar power. So when there's no sunshine, then it's drawing off the battery packs. And so Overunity systems, solar systems as a replacement for the grid is very simple conceptually. It's just very, very challenging to roll out. But so yeah, I think I'll leave it there. I'll probably do some more podcasts on this topic, but hopefully you get the concept of Overunity. Hopefully you can see how simple it is to actually apply the principles of Overunity systems. And I think most importantly that you can see that the only thing that really matters is that you understand that authority has to always be delegated, not completely distributed consensus decision making. That will never work. And that you want everyone to be free to make their own decisions within the framework that we've collectively agreed. We collectively agree that if sales fall below 11.5% projected yield, then you're gonna commit to doing 30 phone calls a day. If you're projecting more than that, then that surplus is what entitles us to just explore our curiosity and be free. And that's what self-responsibility means, is that we understand that our curiosity and that absolute and total autonomy is a privilege. But when we earn that privilege, we enjoy it to the best of our ability. Okay, so that's it for now for the nature of Overunity. Talk soon.